can't imagine what it was like being a gamer back then on the Nintendo and really loving a game like Castlevania and Legend of Zelda, and then when the sequel came out, people I wonder what the mass reaction was because
Oh gosh.
Simon's Quest is one of those cryptic games where you gotta stand somewhere for like what 30 seconds before a hurricane or a little dirt devil comes out and reveals a path underwater, and then Zelda 2 is like it's like a regular 2D side scroll like Castlevania, isn't it?
Which one?
Z-
Castlevania
Legend of Zelda
2?
2.
Oh yeah, that one's a 2D side scroller. Yes.
Yeah, and it had a lot of weird names. I watched the Cinemassacre review of it, um, and it was really weird the decisions they made. I don't remember every single detail, but I remember that some things were had very odd names. The enemies,
Hmm.
but I can't imagine that disappointment receiving a game that wasn't the game that you enjoyed originally.
Yeah, I think that's happened with a lot of series pivots over the
Yeah.
years where they say, "Oh, we're gonna pivot to a whole new thing," and then everyone's like, "What is this?" And they're like,
Well,
"It's a new thing," and why?
well, I mean, a lot of it's been successful, like with Grand Theft Auto. I mean, imagine really loving Grand Theft Auto 1 and 2, and then all of a sudden Grand Theft Auto 3 is like, oh, we're 3D now, 3D open world.
Mhm. That is true. Yeah, there are times where it has definitely gotten better. Um, and sometimes also time is, time makes the heart grow fonder, or I
Hmm.
think it's actually absence makes the heart grow fonder, but sometimes just time in general can really alter perception of a lot of things. Like, remember when Metal Gear Rising Revengeance came out and everybody was like, what does this have to do with Metal Gear? We don't like this isn't a Metal Gear game. And nowadays, it is like the most memed on thing, and everybody adores the hell out of this game. And you can't go 5 seconds online without hearing "Standing here, I realize."
That's a very interesting game because there's a lot of the slicing mechanic was really cool.
That was a really well executed mechanic because it felt good to do.
Hmm.
And I also think that, like, kind of going on this whole idea of like sequels that remove mechanics, I think sometimes you have to get to a point where you acknowledge that some mechanics were only good and only fun for one game, and they were in the game that they were in that game, and they were fun, and then that's it. Let's just forget about him. That was fun. Like, oh, there's one that I was thinking of. Red Faction Guerrilla. Did you ever play that ever?
No, no, I've heard of it, but I don't know what it is exactly.
So humans are colonizing Mars, and but Earth is being a jerk and saying, "Hey, you guys owe us a lot of taxes," and Mars is like, "Yo, no taxation without representation," and they try to pull in America, and so you join this resistance force that's fighting back against the Earth, like the Earth soldiers, who are oppressing the people and making them ship all their resources back to Earth while the people of Mars are barely surviving. And it is so it is one of those games that it's like it hits on a really weird mechanic that you're like, I never asked for this, but this is so good. This is exactly what I wanted. Where you have a sledgehammer is your melee weapon, and you can break down structures. If it is a structure in the game, you can smack it and it will, and you can break out pieces of it until it can collapse. And
Wow.
it is so much fun. Where it also works with like explosives and explosive charges, um, and it is really good at embodying the whole like idea of the whole guerrilla warfare, where you'll have these missions where you're like, I don't know if I could take this compound by just charging at it and engaging in a prolonged gun battle.
Mm.
But if I place charges at the base of all the parts of the hangar, I can blow it up and collapse it on their helicopter or their air support, so they won't get that. And then I can do this all from this rooftop, so I can smash in the roof and then drop down and kill the commander. You can like strategize around destruction, and it was a really cool feature. But I think it only would work in that game. because of the very specific setting, and it contributed to the Korea feel of it. Um,
Do,
so yeah,
do you mean gorilla?
I gorilla. Oh yeah, gorilla. Korea. Yeah, I always hear see it. I'm like, oh yeah, Korea, because the ILLA, Korea tortilla.
well, I think it's gorilla because of like heck, the gorilla team or something in history. Unless they intentionally pronounce it that way. I always thought it was pronounced gorilla.
Gorilla. Okay, yeah, it is gorilla. I was just checking the pronunciation. Well, you learned something new, but yeah, I always call it gorilla because I see it and
Gorilla.
I'm like, it looks like a Spanish words. In Spanish, is something that has two eyes. It has like two L's. Usually is r, or in two R's. It gets worse. It says like gorilla, but no, it's gorilla.
Oh, okay.
Yawn, bro. Guerrilla warfare, dude.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking of. Guerrilla warfare.
Mhm. Yeah, man, that's now that you bring it up, I'm like, oh, that's happened to a lot of things, and there are games that definitely have hurt from having their having features removed, but there are also games that have definitely, um, you know, made big switches that have definitely seen a major leap in success because of things they took out and things that they put in.
Hmm.
Man, that's so it's just so weird to think of, and also just looking at my my Steam library right now. I'd also have to see like my physical game library, but yeah, that's happened with quite a lot of games. Huh.
So you don't have any more to mention.
Um, Nothing I can think of right now. No.
Okay, well maybe I want to go ahead and go through my list, and if you think of one, just
Yeah.
let me know.
All right.
All right, my first one is Film Editor, and they stopped doing this in Driver Parallel Lines, and basically Driver One, Driver Two, Driver Three, which by the way, Driver Three is probably one of my biggest guilty pleasures in gaming.
Wasn't the Driver series one of those games that people went back to? They're like, "Yo, this is really good."
I
Like a lot of people, from what I've heard, at least.
I haven't really heard a whole lot of reaction from the Driver series because a lot of people are attached to Grand Theft Auto. I
Mm.
personally love it because I really love the handling of the vehicles, and a lot of the level design is created just so you can drive your vehicle between buildings and stuff and jumping ramps, and I always found it fascinating. Of course, Grand Theft Auto was designed that way, but something was always very distinct about the Driver series. But in Film Editor is definitely one thing Grand Theft Auto I felt stole from Driver, because once Driver stopped doing it, I think Grand Theft Auto kind of jumped on it like, hey, let's take that. And um, because Grand Theft Auto 4 had it for PC, they didn't have it for consoles. But then Grand Theft Auto 5 eventually added it for consoles. So it's not exactly gone, but it's just they took it out of. Okay, when Driver Parallel Lines was announced, I actually found out about it through a magazine. I really missed those days where you found out about a video
Mm.
game by flipping a page. And
Man.
well, the entire time before the game came out, I kept imagining, I'm like, oh man, all the movies are gonna make with this, all the crazy stuff I did with Driver 3. I still have those replays saved, by the way, from Driver 3. Maybe I'll upload them to the channel sometime just for fun. And
Mm.
so Driver Parallel Lines came out, and it was a fun game. It was great. I loved it. I wish they would remaster it and port it over, but there's not a demand, unfortunately. But it came out, didn't have one, and so I was like, oh, all right. But I didn't have to wait too long because I think that was released in 2006. Driver Parallel Lines, and
What?
let's see.
That
Did you
sounds.
play that?
I I just remember hearing about the Driver series. I just didn't know it was like that old. I think the most recent one I've heard of was Driver San Francisco.
Yeah, that one was weird. I tried playing and I just couldn't get into it.
Because I think it was Zero Punctuation. He had a really funny review on Driver San Francisco where he was, I don't know, he just had this a lot of really funny things to say about it. I might send you a link to that. But yeah,
but
I
oh, sorry.
haven't played any of them. I haven't played any of them though.
Driver Parallel Lines does a very interesting thing where in the story, in the middle of the game, or the story, whatever, it advances like 20 years, 20 or 30 years, and your character ages because he gets arrested at some point in the story. So of course he doesn't get out till 20 or 30 years later. So then the map updates to modern times, and you're playing as the old version of your character.
Huh.
And I don't think I've ever seen a game do it exactly like that before, where the whole map changes because it has to adjust according to the modern upgrades and constructions. And of
That's
course,
yeah.
yeah.
That's actually really cool. I swear I had heard about something that was doing that, or some game that had like construction, or different things that were changing as the game world was playing through, but I cannot remember it for the life of me.
But yeah, it didn't have a film editor, but I think I had so much fun with the game. It didn't bother me for too long, but it still just kind of sucks thinking back because the entire time I was waiting for the game, I was just thinking about a film editor. But I
Mhm.
2 years later, Grand Theft Auto 4 came out for PC, and I was able to do it there, so it wasn't too drastic, but something I remember as a kid. My number two is cutting tails off in Dark Souls. It was just in Dark Souls, and then
Yeah.
never came back for some reason.
Hmm.
Now it technically comes back in Elden Ring, but it's not significant in any way, and it's also kind of vague in its use because it's for the squid enemies. You can cut their tentacles off, but they regenerate after a certain amount of time. So
Oh.
so that's a weird. I don't know if there was a callback or something like that, but I'm like, man, you guys clearly can still do it. Why don't you guys still do it?
Yeah, I think that the cutting off like tails and stuff, it does lend a nice amount of some like viscerality, if that's even a word.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because it makes it so that it feels like your attacks have some impact, and I guess that a lot of games have kind of strayed away from dismemberment. Like, what was the last game that had? I mean, aside from like horror games, obviously, but remember when just like every other Star Wars game you could cut off arms and legs and stuff. Like, did you ever play the Jedi Academy games?
No.
Oh, that one, it was so good. It was a T-rated game, but yeah, absolutely. Your lightsaber could cut off arms, cut off hands, cut off legs. There was like this really cool kill animation where you would like, if you were locked sabers with somebody, you would slide your blade down and cut their hand off and then slash through their body. It's like, because if they cut their hand off, they drop their saber because they can't hold it, and
Mm-hmm.
so then you slash through their body. They had so many creative things that they did with that, and it was like, yeah, it was super normal. I think Star Wars always was very good at having a tasteful explanation for bloodless dismemberment, where it was like, yeah, because lightsabers cauterize wounds pretty much the second they touch, um, because it's a kind of a really really hot beam cutting through you. So yeah, anything it touches would probably immediately sear over.
There's a.
But
Oh, sorry.
oh no, continue.
There's a game called Bloodstorm. It's kind of like Mortal Kombat, but you can actually rip off the arms and legs of the person you're fighting, and eventually they're just a torso with a head, and the only way you can attack is
Just
squirting blood
headbutt
on
each
your
other.
opponent. It's a really cool idea, but it just wasn't executed well as a fighter. It's something I really
Mhm.
remember just because of that concept. But definitely look that up. It's not really well known, but yeah, that would be really fun to see again. But
Huh. That's yeah, super interesting. And that's actually one of those things that I guess is kind of related to this, is not just features being taken out of games, but things that used to be in games that just aren't anymore.
yeah.
I think is also one of those topics that's like, it really gives you the vibes of the horse staring out over the water going, man. And you remember these things that were super prevalent in games,
Mm-hmm.
and now it's just not. Like the aggressive monetization of games, I think has destroyed a lot of game design fundamentals, where a lot of games that have to be designed around being a live service first and a game second are really, really hampered in design because things need to be designed to encourage you to pay in whatever way possible. And I don't know, it's hard. It feels like it's harder to find really, really good games that live on their mechanics alone.
Mm-hmm.
Like you've talked about a few. Like I know you've been playing. You're terrible at parking or whatever it's called.
You suck at parking.
You suck at parking, yeah. You suck at parking. You've been playing like Frogun. You've been playing, all these games that, that's kind of what the indie sphere has had to take over. Is, hey, remember when you had to buy a game because word of mouth told you that it was super kick ass?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's what indie has to do now. Um, and it feels just like such a shame that a lot of really fun features feels like games have to be more sanitized, because some features, that could have been, not even risque, but just like, overly violent, like I said, with the Star Wars games and Dismemberment. It was fun. Yeah, it's, that sounds weird, and it's, get me on a list or whatever, but it was fun to, do that kind of stuff. It added to the charm and the enjoyment of the game, because that's what happens in Star Wars. We see Luke's hand get cut off. We see the dude in the cantina get his arm cut off. Like, there's a lot of dismemberment in Star Wars, and
Mm-hmm.
so that was a big part of the games as well. And nowadays, I can't remember the last Star Wars game. I think there was some in Jedi Fallen Order. I don't remember.
Do they even dismember anything in the sequels? I can't remember.
They do, yeah. They Oh yeah, this the sequel. Oh wait, are you talking about the sequels or
I'm
the
talking about the
prequels?
new sequel. Sorry.
The new ones. Uh, if I have to think this hard about it, it's not good or memorable.
Yeah.
It's not well done like it was
Not like Count Dooku's head
everywhere else.
falling off and rolling to the side.
Yeah, that, because that was one of the things, is it adding to the real, the viscerality of Star Wars and kind of like regrounding it. Like, hey, just because there's there's space wizards and lasers, doesn't mean people don't still die in this. And like
Mm-hmm.
that moment of Anakin, Zha! And it just, the quiet as his head just kind of falls to the side. You're like, oh, oh my. It's a moment that brings you back down. And I can't remember a lot of things about the sequels now that you mentioned that. And that makes me really sad. Um,
uh,
People forgot how to have fun, is what I think the message there is.
yeah, without trying to go too deep into what I dislike about Disney, we probably should move on.
Oh man. But ragging on Disney, that's like my second favorite pastime.
Oh, God. Thank you for listening to this podcast clip. If you want to watch more of the podcast, the full podcast is in the link in the description, along with my guest channel name. And if you would like to guest in a future podcast, please contact me and we shall talk so we can discuss many, many topics, more to come. Other than that, have a glorious day.